Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts, another night edition. It's about 1 in the morning. Seems like a good time to record. So today's episode is going to be about emotional intelligence, which is also referred to as EQ, or emotional quotient, like IQ, intelligence quotient. Hate that word. Emotional IQ is something really big in this world because there are potentially older generations that have an immense abundance of this, and we have a younger generation that is struggling to have any of it. The way I would like to frame this in your mind as you listen to this episode is this is an extremely critical subject to think about, discuss, probably first with yourself and then with any like minds, because especially if you're a parent, this is so massive. Because it's one of these things where if you look up, EI or EQ, and you start looking at the level of research that went into it, it was pioneered in a book in 1964. I think a guy named Mandock did it. And it was reprised and reprised and reprised. And when the ruling class hears something about this, they are extremely aware of this because they live with this sort of thing in their mind constantly. What makes them superior to everyone else? I mean, you can debate their superiority. Now, of course, the siblings of those that actually pioneered the financial institutions, the governmental institutions, they can have offspring that never learn this, and they live in a trust fund world, or they hold more celebratory roles within banking. They don't really do anything, but they kind of go in and act smart because someone ahead of them in their family tree knocked it out of the park. But I assure you, they put money aside to figure these things out, and when they decide, those are the kind of people that are in the profiles that can do us harm, that have traditionally done us harm. They thought for themselves, and they had self-awareness. They were able to be self-motivated. They didn't need anyone telling them what to do to go out and do something amazing. Where do you think the truth comes from when it's been hidden? Well, there's two ways you can find the truth. The 1% of the game is you serendipitously fall on the truth and you go, oh my God, there's some truth. That almost never happens. 99% of the time, someone starts becoming extremely aware, extremely enlightened, and starts smelling something in the room and goes, wait a minute, something's wrong here. This big terrorist attack is not the way, it couldn't have happened the way they said it could. Couldn't happen in the way they said it could in science. It can't have happened in terms of individuals that have been accused of being, a part of something. So you need to understand that EI or EQ is something huge that we need to make sure that we protect our children so that they may have some. And this could be protecting them from bad public schools, making sure your kid doesn't go to a shitty college where teachers and professors who have escaped the reality, escaped real life. And God bless a lot of teachers. A lot of teachers are just, great people that know the kids need to learn things. Some of them, more in the university side of things than anything, they stay inside the university because they got a crappy degree, and the only option they have is to teach it. But they don't really want to be there, and so they become disenfranchised. And as they become unhappy, they take on doctrine of disenfranchised harvesting political parties that do nothing but incubate hate and intolerance. And then, of course, they accuse the other party that's actually more tolerant and has hundreds of years of history of being tolerant and freeing slaves as being the ones that do what their party does. You feel me? So one, you may need to regain some EQ yourself or enhance the EQ that you have. Understand that this is what it's called. But as you buy your kid a game console, a big fancy cell phone, let them hang out with the wrong kids when they're really young, when you get to determine who they hang out with, right? There's a point where they just throw a big fucking fit, and all of a sudden parents go, well, I guess we're at that point now where my kid can hang out with fucking meth dealers, None of it's true. None of it's true. You're in control until they're 18. The United States of America, at least. But you want to start this as soon as possible so that you don't have a fight on your hands. You have a protocol, a method that they can live by, that they understand, and explain it to them. Explain it to them over and over and over throughout the years. Not every single day, but maybe every year, once a year, you kind of take a little break and you say, how are you feeling, kid? You know, do you feel fairly self-aware? You can look at their life and find out if they can self-manage. You can look at their life and see if they're self-motivated. Because a lot of this is, it's funny, it ties back into some of the programming models of the hosts in Westworld and HBO. I know I keep beating that up, but I mean, man, just having seen that and seen the maze, which is in the very first episode, not ruining anything for you, and then looking at this table, looking at the philosophy that is revealed over the course of the first season about how all the participants in programming the host to try to figure out, you know, artificial consciousness and then eventually maybe real consciousness, right? But this will also enhance your life tremendously if you're trying to take control. Sometimes you gain EQ when you are in a situation that has been bothering you, but you didn't quite know it. And so when you fully wake up, or at least get to stage 1 of waking up, which is going to be different for everyone, you start to go, oh my God, I hate my life because look at what's going on. And then some people get depressed, some people get angry, and it's like, skip all those emotions, man. Forget all that crap. All you need to focus on is the positive, super positive reality that now you're in control. You may not have all the fixes in. You may not even know what to do next. But the second you realize, I need to get out of this place, I need to get out of this rut I'm in, this loop I'm in, you have control all of a sudden. Sit and scheme. Design your life. But I'm going to go through the hemispheres of EQ, and let's parse each and every single one of them so we sort of know what our checklist is to be able to say to ourselves in the mirror every morning, I got you. I got you. We're awake, aren't we? For good or better or worse or whatever, we're awake. Now, the first hemisphere of EQ is self-awareness. What does that mean? I mean, aren't we all self-aware? I mean, I think therefore I am sort of thing. Well, probably on average, the listeners that listen to, you know, if you get to like 10 shows, you're pretty aware on this show, I would imagine. But now here's the interesting thing for yours truly. Having been a tech geek my whole life, a science geek my whole life, psychological geek my whole life. I mean, for my formative years, I was doing it, you know, researching it and that sort of thing. I was always surrounded by kids, not that many, but some super genius kids who probably went off and got their PhDs. But the thing is they weren't self-aware. Even though some of them they had these other hemispheres. Some of them weren't self-aware. Now, what would self-aware be defined as? Well, one, seeing yourself as an individual within the group of society is one of the first milestones. You see yourself as a sovereign entity in this world, and you start questioning the rules on you, and you go, well, do I agree with these rules? And for a lot of them that protect you and your safety, you're going to go, hell yeah, you know, murder's a crime. Let's keep that one because that, you know, protects me. But I'm not sure it's such a coarse brush concept. I think it is more of a minute concept, and I'll explain. I used to have an employee, a great guy, smarter than you can imagine. I mean, really brilliant programmer. But I don't think he had full self-awareness. Now, you could just say he just didn't give a shit about the things I'm going to mention. But I think it was to a degree that was chronic, and I think it was in a category of self-awareness that I had seen and have seen, although I haven't seen in a long time, many people with his talent have this lack of self-awareness, especially working in the video game industry for so many years. Physical appearance is a huge thing. One of the things that your geekier programmers, at least back in the day, and this was a huge part of like Revenge of the Nerds, the movie, right? Because it had become a stereotype that your geekier, nerdy guy didn't have physical awareness of his or her body. Now, I can't say much about seeing females do this because sadly there weren't a lot of female programmers when I was a kid. Hopefully there's a lot more today, and hopefully it gets a lot, increases many-fold in the near future here. But guys would come to work and their hair would be bedhead, which told me, one, they never took a shower. They got out of bed, put clothes on, and came to work. I honestly didn't smell anybody bad. I mean, no one ever had BO. I have no story of that, and that's talking about hundreds and hundreds of people I've worked with over the years, so that's good. But the other one is very common in that their clothes that they put on must have been in some hamper, some, garbage bag all stuffed in there. Because they would come to work with clothes that were they looked like wadded up tinfoil that had been unfolded and put on. And what's funny about the last person I ran into, he's a super handsome guy. And so I'm sitting there going, I don't get it. Like, this is a dude that could get pretty much any woman that he wanted. I mean, at least get the attention of the woman, and he'd have to solve the conversation and be interesting as a person, which I think he was. He was very well read. He's the one that gave me my first David Icke book, too. Love this guy. But now here's what's really strange. Out of, say, 200 days out of the year, I might have seen him face to face, working with him. He would only do this like maybe, I don't know, once a month maybe. But there was a point when he was doing it several days a week, and I was just shocked. But this was stereotypical of a bunch of geniuses that I had worked for in the past, and worked with, I should say. And when you see someone do it at a chronic level, you're realizing that their self-awareness is at zero. When they go and look in the mirror, they don't see anything wrong. When they put on horrible clothing, they don't, it's clean clothing, and maybe it's okay clothing, but the idea is they're putting on stuff that just makes them look like a hobo. And that impacts the way that you're viewed. We're all judged by the book cover, right? As much as we know we shouldn't do that, if we don't do that, we don't have a sense of instinctual protection against people who are potentially threats to us. So we develop it on an instinctual scale, and then we apply it at non-threatening scales, like a nerd. Okay, you might judge a nerd. You might judge me. I've got long hair. You might think, it's funny. I walk into restaurants around here, and people will, every once in a while, they'll go, "Are you a surfer?" And they want me to tell them my name and that I'm some famous surfer. I could just tell. And I'm like, no. At most, I'm a singer. That's about it, right? And some people follow me around and ask me if I'm Jerry Cantrell. That's hilarious, right? Seriously, that's happened. And then some people call me a woman before they realize I turn around, which is even funnier. I'm trying to keep track of those. Just happened the other day. But there's that physical self-awareness, and then there's sort of that, do you participate in society awareness? Now, how many people do you know trust everything? They trust their government, they trust the police, they trust everything. I'm not saying that all these factions are corrupt, but they don't even think about it. They'll drive through one of these drunk driving checkpoints, which is a complete violation of your rights. I don't support that shit whatsoever. Hey, don't fucking pull over society because there's a couple assholes. Go and work on the law so you can sit outside of a bar, and when you see someone stumbling out, it's no longer entrapment. It's, hey, people drink here and people get in cars and drive and kill people. So I have the goddamn right to sit out in the parking lot and watch you. In fact, just sit in the parking lot with a uniform on, and Uber will make a ton of money and a bunch of people will live, including the person who's walking out there. But we've turned drunk driving into a gigantic business in California, so we love it when they get in the car and get busted because it's $15,000 in fines. They lose their driver's license, which probably increases public transportation. And it's just, we got people in the system now. 3 of those and you're going to be in jail the rest of your life. It's that old saying, hey man, we got all the solutions to the world. We could fix the whole planet in a few months if we just stop being illogical about everything. I don't think it's entrapment, If someone walks up to you and wants to sell you cocaine, you go, yeah, okay, you're busted. Was that entrapment? Really? You actually volunteered to take an illegal drug home, and it's my fucking fault you did that. I don't buy that. But anyway, you see people with their heads down, and they just are in deer eyes constantly. Especially when you drive, you see people drive like robots, and you're like, they have no concept that they're, they have to take care of their participation on the highway, on the roads. They're driving 10 miles under the speed limit. Whatever. They don't signal, whatever. They're just not integrated with society. They're not aware that they are participating. And so their self-awareness is at zero or very, very low. There are, and this comes from, and there's habits that come from different countries, especially countries that are overpopulated. When they come to America, it's interesting. I haven't seen this in quite a while, but there used to be this thing where, and I'm not going to pick on anyone in particular, but there was a particular place where people come from, and they come here to Southern California, and you'll be standing in line to get food, to get coffee, whatever, and these people will butt right in front of you. And it's because in their culture, if they don't do that, they may not get food because there's not enough in the line, or they're just pushy over there, and so they do it over here. And then eventually they always learn not to do that. But at first, they don't know. They're not aware that they're in this other culture and that we don't play like that, So I think there's many, many levels to that. But the self-awareness enables all the other hemispheres to actually occur. Without self-awareness, you got nothing. And so, when they used to ask kids, what are you going to be when you grow up? That was a self-awareness conversation. You're 8 years old and the kid's going, an adult's asking me a question. Well, that's the first thing that's amazing. Wow, I'm equal enough to answer a big question like that. Well, I want to be a fireman. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be, a doctor, whatever it is, right? Movie star, rock star, whatever it is. They got to choose, and they get to choose when that question's asked, which is why it's such an important question. It's a fun little question you can ask kids all the time. It gets them dreaming. And then if you're smart, you'll go to the next level, and if somebody says, well, you want to be an astronaut? Yeah. Well, why do you want to be an astronaut? Well, because I want to go into space. Great. Well, what do you think what are you going to take in school to make sure that when it comes time for you to be an astronaut, you know what you need to do? And they may not know the answer. Well, I don't know. Well, you know what you probably should take? What? Well, I think astronauts are really good at math. I think a lot of astronauts actually become pilots. So some of the people join the Air Force and they get to become really great pilots, and then they apply to NASA and they become the pilots. Some people are just straight up scientists. They're excellent biologists or chemists or whatever. And you get the kid to start seeing their whole future at 8 years old. Or whatever age you ask them. Now, the next hemisphere is self-management. Now, I've got episodes on this in season 1. I didn't make it because I had read an EQ diagram or something, right? It's because it's a core part of you getting what you want in life. Maybe we'll just take this little kids thing and make sure we keep working that up. If you wanted a goal, you have steps to get to the goal. And you need to itemize those steps on a piece of paper, hopefully, not a digital device, but a piece of paper. And you go back to that piece of paper, maybe you hang it on the wall and you got a checklist. But you might find out later on that one of the steps you put down is actually 10 steps. And you might want to make another piece of paper to outline, okay, I got 10 little steps here, and then this one's done. And then the next one, it's only one thing you need to do, and boy, that feels good. You got a big one off the big list, right? But the next one down is 20 steps. Oh my gosh, right? But you're going to have to manage your entire life. And the problem with society today, as we know, and the millennials are the ones getting attacked the most for this lack of EQ. I think it is by design, because I think the people that create the problems for EQ, low EQ, are the people that greenlight through money projects that will rob a person of their self-awareness, rob them of any time in their life to manage their lives, right? Spend your whole life in your telephone. Spend your whole life on some game console. or something that isn't related to anything productive in your life. Now, sometimes life just gets really busy and you get into that loop. You're going to work, you're saving money, you're trying to do something, buy a house, get married, go on a trip, pay for an operation, whatever it is, you're doing something very specific. So in that particular case, you're kind of getting distracted from one thing you want to manage into fruition so that you can bring another thing into fruition that perhaps has a higher priority, maybe less pizzazz, but it's important and it's strategic. So don't feel bad if you get into that situation either. Now, one of the biggest factors and one of the other hemispheres to this EQ system relates back to the self-management situation. It is facilitated, of course, by the previous one, which is self-awareness, and is the hemisphere of motivation. It should be called self-motivation, to be honest. How do you motivate yourself? How would you even do that? You have things that you love, and when you love something, you tend to gravitate to it, which is I think it is the addiction, dopamine-related mechanism of which those that fun things that destroy your life, okay, again, they're fun things, okay, but they're not things that are going to reward you long term. And so you're always stuck in a short-term goal if you allow other folks and major corporations and whatever entertainment streams to replace your life with some spectator sport. But you have to figure out how to motivate yourself. I try on this show. I literally try to give you guys every technique I've used for myself, not just a specific thing because I'm different than you, but the mechanisms I use to dream up something to motivate myself. Tony Robbins has a beautiful technique, which is to very explicitly illustrate your final product when you get your goal. And you're going to have many goals in life, so don't think this is a one-off project. So, for instance, when you write screenplays, nobody cares if you write screenplays until you're mega, mega famous, right? Nobody cares. But you have to do it, and you have to do it because you have stories inside of you. They're your children. They're literally on the other side of a membrane of non-existence, but their soul's right there, and you can see it, and you can see it in all this beautiful detail. But until you write it down and make it birth into this world, it is just sitting over there, and there's not a single human being on earth that knows that it exists unless you share the treatment with somebody. But sometimes you can share your treatment so much, you run out of the steam, just like Ray Bradbury said. You use up all the energy to talk and talk and talk, but you never write the script. So what I tell people is that, and it's an extreme thing that is not true in its absolute sense, but it's one way that I use to motivate myself, which is to say, nobody on earth really cares if you live or die. Now, it's not true. Obviously, your closest friends and your family do care, but they're always going to be there, and they're that kind of hum in your life. The other way of looking at it is nobody cares about anything that you haven't done. They care about the things that you do. What if Aerosmith or God, I always use them. I don't really listen to them that much, but I love them because they've lasted a really long time. But let's just say, what's a big band these days? People like, I don't know, all the big classics. I mean, right now we don't really have a lot of like super duper mega musicians that are out there today just cranking it out like they used to, right? But like an MGMT or the kind of Empire of the Sun kind of musicians, if they told you that they have thought of the best album in the world, how much do you care? Other than get in the studio and make it happen so I can hear it. And what if I gave you the option of listening to 10 hours of them talking about the album that they haven't made, or I give you an hour to listen to the album that they did make? What's the difference? 10 hours of talking about working, well, that's one thing. But you can't enjoy that as much as you could probably enjoy the album itself. And it just becomes a big tease. And you can tease yourself. So you need to understand, and I'm going to share with you, again, the trick that I use to manage take over management positions at particular companies, whether I'm the CEO or a director or whatever, you have to figure out the best day that this company has ever had. When did it work? And then you have to replicate it. Again, in the mid-90s, at probably 25, 26 years old, I realized that the game of life is really about being able to replicate perfection and not just do a one-hit wonder. And that means that you have to turn yourself and your mind into this exciting, amazing, thrilled, always motivated machine where you kind of get inside your command center that can make anything. If any of you have been a Doctor Who fan in your life, think about how amazing this character would really feel in real life. He's got a new sidekick, usually some beautiful woman. They come inside the TARDIS. He lives forever. He's like 1,100, 1,200 years old or whatever his age is nowadays, probably 1,500 at this point. But he comes into the TARDIS that can travel any place in the universe at any point in time. And so this console that he comes up to can go anywhere. How exciting is that? He can go and solve problems in any hemisphere of time, etc., in the fictional world that is Doctor Who. So he has a machine to always crank out episodes. And plus, when you get tired of the actor, we just transform the guy. You have to do that to yourself. And sometimes it requires that you redo your world a little bit. Sometimes it could be what's called the Hawthorne effect. You take your home office, which generally has every toy that you'd ever dreamed of having when you were a kid. One, you want to evaluate all the toys to see if one of them has deprecated out of your esteem pool. You had this old keyboard. It was amazing for 5 years. You cranked out a couple albums. You participated in some keyboard way. But now it's not doing it for you anymore. So instead of buying an extra rack to kind of put it up there out of sight, out of mind, put it back in the box. Put it away for a while. If you never get it out of the box in a year or two, sell it. Sell it for a decent price to someone else who's going to find that keyboard one of the most amazing, energizing things in the world. So then you're contributing to the universe in a kind of an ancillary way, right? But then once you figure out everything in your office that it motivates you, move everything around. Move your desk to the other side of the room. Clean it up. Get rid of all the crap. And throw some shit away. Get it all worked out. And then every day you go back in your office for a couple years at least, you're going to feel motivated again because you've redone your life. It's going to be fun. Using myself as an example, when you write screenplays, you will definitely have a moment when you are absolutely knee-deep, neck-deep into a script and there's no break that can happen because you have a deadline. But until the deadline shows up, and you want to probably crank out a script about every 4 months, because that's what a professional has to do, so why do anything less than that? You might have to build up to that. You have to get your machine working, right? Go see my episodes on screenwriting if you're a screenwriter. You'll speed up pretty quickly. But anyway, I will write 2 or 3 things at once. Now, what ends up happening is that I'll write something in treatment form and something else in script form and another one just in my head. And I'll think about it and think about it. I got a dictaphone with me at all times. I'm always taking notes. And usually when I read it out in my dictaphone, I remember it 90%, 95%. And every once in a while I'll go back and comb through all the episodes to see where I left a note, that just to make sure I crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. But it's you being self-aware and understanding what motivates you, and then being able to plan your goal, which is self-management. And I'm giving you a very clinical work example. This doesn't have to be a work example, but I think the analogy goes over a lot better. There's like a little bit of honey in that algorithm of life if you can apply it to something that you completely understand. But it could be you losing some weight, you getting some rock-hard abs, you being nicer to people, going out and meeting people if you're too introverted. But now the next hemisphere is the one where it comes up the most in my circles. And I'm working on a project right now with some other genius friends of mine where this is going to be a big deal. And hopefully yours truly will get to contribute some writing to it. And that's empathy. A lot of people think EQ means empathy quota, and I think that's great. It's actually emotional, is the word. But empathy is sort of the first level of an IQ test of being a true human being as we are intended to be, which is that you don't just feel sorry for someone else. That's sympathy, right? I got a whole episode on empathy if you're interested in that subject matter. But empathy is your ability to feel someone else's feelings and then, using your own self-awareness, manage your communication and interaction with other human beings based on their emotions. And is one of the toughest tests that we can have as human beings. And you can be extremely empathetic in one area of your life and have no empathy in another area of your life. And then you could be strategically non-empathetic because you feel like someone needs a kick in the ass. But you could maybe do it in an empathetic way where they're going to respond to you more. Now, I've said this a couple times on the show. When I was a kid, I heard the phrase, treat others as you would treat yourself. And I'm not sure that's ever been written down because the other one is just love your neighbor and love yourself. Just left it quiet like that without some obligation of how to behave very specifically towards anyone else. And the problem that I ran into was that I know that my independence as a kid was, one, being left to my own devices quite a bit. But anytime I, got weak as a child and cried, my father would mock cry in front of me, which looks very, very mean. But the interesting thing is, it ends that blubbering crap really quick in your life. I don't remember crying past the age of 4 or 5. Last time I remembered it happening, I think I was 3 years old, 4 years old, and I was in the living room that my parents had converted a garage. It's 1105 West 4th, Chanute, Kansas, 66728 or 66720. I was in the garage that's now turned into part of the house. My family did that. And I remember crying for some reason, and my dad was just blubbering, and my mother was yelling at him and hitting him, funny, not punching or anything, but she was like, stop that, And he was, I think, right. It makes you have a thick skin. You don't have to be a thick-skinned child to endure that. You become thick-skinned because of it. And yeah, you might hate your dad for a little while, but in the end, hey, if he's the guy that's willing to take the sling or the arrow from you in a sense that I don't like my dad as much as I like my mom because she's always nice and she listens to me cry like a baby, like a little bitch, and my father's like, there's no crying in baseball. Man the fuck up and live your life, right? Sorry for the profanity, but come on. I know all my videos are going to get 17 and above eventually here. So when I started seeing the success in my life because I nutted up after 4 or 5 years old and just ate it, you hurt yourself, and unless it's extreme pain where you're not crying as a protest towards something happening to you, you're merely expressing this, I have so much pain in my body, I need to let it out verbally, so there's that thing. I've had that happen to me a couple times. But I couldn't treat people the way I treated myself because I was absolutely tough on myself. And I loved it. I still dig it to this day. There's so many kids, especially millennials, and I don't mean to pick on anybody, but even Gen Zs, I hear people say this work hard, play hard thing. And they love that phrase and they feel like a big baller when they say it. But they have never worked hard and played hard in their fucking life. Or they played hard, but they don't work hard. They don't have a definition of working hard half the time. Now, kids that get into Hollywood and succeed, they know what it's like. And at any age, they can be a Gen Zer, and they sit on a set for 14, 16, 18 hours. They get 4 hours of sleep. They're the first people on the set, the last people to leave. They're having to endure very cranky directors or cranky, set hands, and, you just have to take it because it's not personal. It's that day has been very difficult, and there's little patience in everyone's patience pool. And so part of the big algorithm for success, especially if you want to work for CEOs, like every single company I've ever worked for, I start off low, and within 6 months, I am working for the CEO in some capacity. I still have my job in the company, but the CEOs go, they figure out that I'm a special ops guy, and they'll go, look, I need you to help me put together a presentation. Either maybe it's graphic, maybe it's writing better words, doing something miraculous that no one in the world's ever done. And then you move up. But they're not they're not hired to be the CEO because they're a big emotional bag of problems, right? They're hired to be the CEO because they're rock hard when they need to be. And when they come home, they need to shed that whole mechanism and kneel on one knee and give their little daughter a kiss on the cheek and a big hug to their son. They need to do this, and then treat the spouse correctly, whichever sex that is, right? And so that's why they become very professional. Now, I have seen miraculous things online with younger millennials, and I'll tell you I mentioned this one time in all the episodes, and I'll mention it again now. I've seen several videos where people who are drunk end up going to the wrong home. And I don't know how the hell they get in these homes. There's no sign of burglary going through a window or anything, but somehow someone leaves a door unlocked and someone will come in drunk and end up sleeping on the sofa, and they're so wasted that they don't, even when they're approached, they don't know who they are, what's going on. But, that's a very tumultuous, risky situation that maybe the person wakes up drunk. And there's been classic situations where I once I heard the testimony of some documentary where a guy had a shotgun in his house as his self-defense mechanism, and he heard some guy in his house, and he goes up and he goes down the hallway, and the drunk thought that the guy was in his house. And so here he comes, and the dude had no choice, and he shot him. I mean, he probably had a choice, but then you have to be physically capable of defending yourself against a drunk. And let me tell you, unless you know how to fight, these drunks will take you out because they don't feel anything. So the guy killed him, and he regretted every single second of it, but he goes, what the hell was I supposed to do? But I've seen some millennials come out with no guns and talk to these guys on the sofa, and luckily they're not the belligerent, violent kind that this other guy happened to encounter. And they'll go, hey man, what are you doing? And the guys will wake up, and they sometimes some of them are like, oh my God, where am I? But most of them, 9 out of 10, they're still wasted. They don't know where they are, and they go, well, you got to go, man. Okay. And then some people will beg, can I just sleep here for the night? And of course, what are you supposed to do? You can't go to bed with some stranger in your house. Who knows what the hell they'll do? And the answer is always no. So I've seen this super advanced empathy from some of these millennials. And so all hope isn't lost, right? But now empathy has been used as a weapon now. And it's being used by the globalists and currently the Cortez, crazy, absolute certifiable fucking crazy Democrats, which are just a few of them, but there's enough of them and they own all the press. So we got to be aware of what's going on there. Hopefully this episode and those references become something of the past. But so let's give you an example of how corporations are using people, and especially the Democratic Party, to harm you. All the corporations that want to feed you horrible food to end your life short, but they also want to sell their what is it, sucrose and all that, all the croses are gross, right? They want to sell you a bunch of crappy food constantly. McDonald's, every single fast food place is selling you shit. The grocery stores are full of so much GMO and crap. It's horrible, right? Okay. Well, what happens when you eat all this crap? You get super unhealthy and you get fat. You become obese. Now, I always preface it like this. There are people in this world who are big people, and they have big bones, and they can be extremely handsome or beautiful at their level of giantness, right? So it's just, and this is without any thyroid problems of any kind, okay? They're just big people. And so I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about, your 5'1" girl who's, 4 feet wide. Your 6 foot guy that weighs 450 pounds without some medical condition. It's because they've been probably disenfranchised in their life because of all the mechanisms that make life suck, right? Economic booms and busts, bad educations, bad educations lead to no job opportunities, and so they live inside food. They become a foodie, an eater. They eat it for pleasure. Some people have abusive situations in their world and they retreat to food because it's the only thing happy in their life. But some people are just lazy. They don't have anything wrong with their life. And they're just eating and eating and eating as if there's no consequence to their heart, their inner fat, I mean, it's really really tough. But then they're going to complain the second they get ill. It's crazy. This is in the movie Branded. The first half of this equation is in the movie Branded, which they just literally say, we're going to sell fat to everybody. Again, there's products you can move. They're cheap to make. So there you go. But what do? They know there was going to be a backlash against obesity. Obesity reports come out every single year. Mexico is finally, I think, overtaken America for obesity. Damn it, Mexico. Here's the thing. They then enlist a bunch of empathetic people, supposedly, kind of faux empathy people. They don't really have a discernment on top of their empathy, meaning they don't have any discretion on top of what we would be feeling empathy for. And so they've created the shame movement to say you're not allowed to say someone is fat because that's to shame them. Remember that big fat girl in the movie theater trying to mess with Milo? And she was she was 4 times as big as she should ever be. But she's screaming and yelling because she hates herself, right? She looks in that mirror. But she doesn't want you to tell her that she should lose some weight because you want her to be okay in life, right? And so then she has to be accountable, and that's a tough thing for her because she's so addicted to all the food she's eating and drinking, right? So they create this shame movement. So they have these idiots towing the shame movement to fight you from trying to make people, trying to get rid of the corporations that feed us all this horrible food. Unreal. It's a mechanism. And so you have these individuals. That's why this episode, I think, is tremendously important. This is a mental weapon against you. This is an intellectual technology that is being used against you. And if they can get rid of the good empathy and accentuate the bad empathy, then they can sell you, with Cyclone B as some air freshener in your house. And if you don't like Cyclone B, then you're a poison shamer, right? When you get all of these things, self-awareness, self-management, you can handle your motivation, you get into your empathy, a qualified empathy, an intelligent empathy. Then you have something called social skills. Why? Because you have been paying attention to society and especially yourself. Now here's the thing that they've discovered about EQ versus IQ. In my entire lifetime, there's some exceptions. Okay, this is why the exceptions are so amazing, and this is why when people have IQ and EQ at a really high level, they become amazing human beings that you want to be around. Okay, people in my life who've got PhDs. I remember so many. There have been so many situations in my life where an employer will be super excited to hire a PhD. And at first, when I was young, in my 20s, or my early 20s, which is when I really started working with multiple PhDs, the inventor of TurboTax, which again was called Macintax back in the day, Michael Morgan, he had a PhD from, I believe, MIT. I think that's where he got his PhD from. I could have that wrong, but I think that's right. He was a very recluse. He was very tall. I mean, he was like 6'4" or more. Giant guy, huge heart in this guy, very quiet. He was very calculated with every answer he ever gave. We used to have this joke about him. You could ask him what 1 + 1 is and what's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. He'll take the equal excruciating amount of time to give an answer, but both answers will be right. That's what kind of guy he was. He's a neat dude. And very few of us ever got a chance to be really side by side with the guy. He would only come into work maybe a couple times a year and sit down with us and explain to us the new thing that he had created. He liked to work at home because he was a PhD, high IQ recluse. Now, that's about all I know about that guy. I don't know if he was, the biggest teddy bear with his kids and played Santa Claus on, well, actually, he was Jewish, so whatever he might have played, right? I don't know. But the other PhDs I ended up working with were sort of a liability to the company. They had quirks and weird things about them. They wanted to recreate their homes at work. And so sometimes we'd have to outfit offices with bizarre things. Like in EA, we had programmers which I don't know if they had PhDs, but they had the equivalent thereof, and they would require that we give them not necessarily an office, but they would, the way that the video game companies usually work is it's a big, catacomb of sort of space, right? So you might have like one area that's sort of smaller in its open area design than other big areas. And so they would sequester it off. They get black sheets. They'd hang it all up, make a huge tent, like a big giant fort, like a little kid. And inside they'd have their world, and you'd walk in. It was super cool, man. They have toys and and LED lights and all kinds of wild stuff in there. Not for their light source, but we always use the monitor as a light source or an incandescent light bulb so we don't lose our lighting and the color correction that's in the game. But after the age of about maybe 23 or so, I never thought that a PhD level person, without meeting them first, especially in the engineering world, was a asset more than a liability. They also have short attention spans, or they will have quirks where very remedial things in life will totally throw them off in life. They might go off and need a religious retreat for 2 weeks, some spiritual retreat, because they're just bizarre people. And they're making tons of money, so they got all the mobility in the world that you could possibly imagine. And they have all those self-awareness issues I talked about earlier. So what they found out is that super high IQ typically means a lack of social skills. And it may be the sacrifice they made when they were young to be smart. They didn't go outside and party and play. They stayed inside and learned and practiced their art. So it's it's something that's a yin and yang perhaps the universe needs. And we need to figure out a way to be empathetic to them and facilitate their needs. But we also need to communicate with them empathetically to get them to do what they need to do for the company, but also to make sure they know that we're on their side. And to maybe walk a few steps towards you, more towards that self-awareness thing, I had a good friend of mine, well, we're on the subject, heart of gold, very smart guy, absolutely lived inside video games, and he had severe motivational problems. He could motivate himself to get his character to the highest level of a video game, even if it took playing 17 hours a day for 2 weeks. He'd literally take vacation to do that when a game released, right? But one time we were at a role-playing event, and I had to take him home one day. And I think we had a little bit of like wine coolers or something like that. This is over 20 years ago, probably over 25 years ago. And he broke down in the car with me. And he was sobbing all of a sudden. And I never seen this guy get emotional ever. He was sensitive, but I mean, he wasn't a guy that cried. And he starts crying, like really hard. I think I mentioned this once in season 1 or something. And so I'm trying to figure out why he's crying, but he's crying at this sudden 100% pace. And so I have to wait for him to get through some of his emotions before I can talk to the guy. And it's just he and I in the car. I'm driving. He's my passenger, taking him home. And I said, what's wrong, dude? What's wrong? Just tell me whenever you get a chance. Tell me what's going on, man. And he said, first thing he said was, he goes, I really want to thank you for being my friend. I was like, wow, you're going to melt my heart here, dude. And I said, well, what can I do for you? What can this friend do for you, man? And he said, well, and there's a happy ending to this story. In so many words. He told me, he goes, man, I've just never been able to get with women like you guys do. And he says, I don't want to be alone, man. I love women, and I just don't know what I'm doing. And he goes, I wasn't raised by my father. And his dad was alive. His dad was just, didn't stay with the family. He's raised by his mom. His mom was super cool and really a brilliant woman. She had taught him to speak 4 or 5 different languages. So he could speak one sentence and he would use different words in different languages because they had better definitions. They were more complete words, and he would teach us stuff all the time. And so, so I had never had anyone approach me like that. And I was like, well, geez, I never really thought about this, right? Now, So obviously I'm in there. He's one of my best friends in the entire world. And so I told him, I said, man, whatever you need, whatever time you want to spend in this game, I'll show you everything I know. Tell you everything I know. And we started going over some very basic things with the opposite sex. And I mean, it's advice that women can take and men can take. And it's essentially my core belief in attracting the opposite sex is to make sure that you are a positive in their life more than a negative. And then be as genuine as you possibly can. Don't BS. And if you have to change who you are to be that person, then change. Go ahead. You're going to dig it too. Trust me. Trust me. Now, the funny thing about this guy is that it just makes me smile just thinking about it. He became a baller. Okay. I have no idea where he is today, but we met a cluster of 3 young ladies. One of my friends in that group ended up marrying one of the ladies, and they have a beautiful family. It's great. But this guy hooked up with the other 2, one at a time. Unbelievable. And one of them has passed, unfortunately, but I found out later that he was like, we're over, because he used to, I used to play, man. He used to come to my house and bring his PlayStation, and he'd play Final Fantasy. And he's amazing. He's amazing at everything he does in a video game. Let me tell you, all these guys are. And I just sit and watch, and he'd just play and I'd watch. It was the most entertaining thing ever. And we start talking. He's like, oh yeah. He goes, like, in a very respectful way, he said he had hooked up with her, and it was very, respectful, and they knew what they were doing, and he's a great guy, and so they were cool. It was just funny. So he changed himself. And one thing we started doing right away was that I said, we got to get out. We got to start going to clubs, because we were young. We were in our mid-20s. I said, well, let's go to clubs, man. And this is where this happened. It was within maybe 3 or 4 months of this moment where he had become self-aware. And he needed help in the motivation realm. And he was fully capable of managing the situation. He had empathy running, dripping out of him, and he was super empathetic about everything. He's a sweet, sweet guy like that. And so, in fact, he was with me on several occasions, but one of my companies that I named after this mechanism of replicating perfection, he was in the office with me. We talked for 3 or 4 hours, and I finally just got it. And eventually, he got me my full-time gig at EA. So I went from contractor to full-time. He's the one that did it. He just looked in the database and went, oh yeah, here's a job right here. Head of web developers. I was like, really? And so that was cool. So I've seen these cycles occur. I've seen people go from 0 to hero, man, multiple times in my life. And usually it takes some sort of epiphany, some sort of moment. Sometimes you just, like he just got tired of being alone. By himself, he was becoming self-aware by himself. And there was no social media. There was no internet to speak of at the time when he was becoming self-aware. He made the changes and did it. Okay. But the EQ people can manage other people better because, one, you've gone through your own path in life. And like I say several times, the biggest mistake that the ruling class has made in this world is creating a bunch of suffering human beings, because there is nothing more self-aware, motivating than to suffer. It is the whole cornerstone of the host programming in Westworld, right? That's what they said. Suffering. Everyone has a story in their life where they suffered and they dug themselves out of suffering, and then boom, they had this amazing, unique personality. So when you suffer a bunch, you start to look at the reasons why you're suffering. Now, the problem is we have a political party that's trying to harvest that moment. So let's just say, my friend, let's take him as a hypothetical. He is feeling this loneliness thing, and he wants to be with other people. But instead of telling me, a person that's going to invest in him and get him what he wants based on his desires, his goals, his principles, his standards in life, this political party comes in and says, you know why you are alone? Because of those people. Because of that race right there. You feel me? This is why we're in a very, very tumultuous stage. And so what would have happened to my friend's EQ? It would have gone back down if he had bit this offer. He would have become a racist. He would have become intolerant of everything. Fascism would be sold to him in an anti-fascist group. The devil flips things, right? Devil's not real, but these people are as evil as it gets. They don't care if you end up dead, crying, goalless, dreamless in a ditch. Did you vote for them? That's all they care. Did you empower them so they can continue doing this to other people? Now, unfortunately on this show, for you guys, I mix my own personal opinions into generic topics. So I am probably, unless you have the ability, and all of you do, to filter out anything you disagree with and still take perhaps the wisdom that I have shaken out of the knowledge that I have experienced, then maybe you can get to some of these things in some of the videos. And again, way back in season 1, which I'm now rewatching because of the remastering process, I'm much better back then about putting in my own opinions. But now 375 videos, believe me, my opinion is starting to become the way that I can motivate myself to do these episodes, right? One of the areas that I want to share with you where I had to upgrade myself, and this probably happened in the last 10 years in a very active way. And I've kind of beat around the bush in previous episodes about this particular stage of my life, but I'm just going to go head on with it right now. I was of the opinion that when I would see people my own age, and this is where I drew the line, plus or minus maybe 5 years or so, or you're at a point where I think that you are so far regressed in your own progress. Like a friend of mine who's maybe he or she is in their mid-30s, but they're acting like they're 19 years old with no clue, or even less. They're not acting like children as a human being, but their goals in life and where they want to be. They know exactly where they want to be. They know where they don't want to be, which is where they are, but they're acting really wimpy with their life. So I spent a lot of time in my life at times trying to make everything smell like cherries for everybody, right? And so the problem was that it didn't work very well. Me sitting around spending a tremendous amount of time to kind of go, well, maybe you should do this and maybe that and maybe this. The minute I gave them any methodology to keep soft, to hang on to their lack of motivation or their excuse pool, their crutch they're leaning on so that they don't get their life, they never snapped out of it on average. Now, some people are brilliant at this. There's been so many movies out there where writers have written these heroes, both on the male and female side, where someone is struggling and the old grandpa or grandmother walks in the room and goes, oh, you want to do that, eh? Well, I know, far be it for me to stop you, but have you ever thought about this? And that thing is like the boom in the script where you're like, whoa. And then the person goes, oh yeah, I never thought about that. And then they're enlightened, and then they become more self-aware, and then they motivate away from that horrible goal that they might have. I think one of the arcs that's really famous is someone will want to seek physical revenge in a script, and there's some contest going on. This is one my buddy wrote this too in his script, where there's like a car race or something as an example, and someone, the guy that's going to lose goes over and tampers with our hero's car so it doesn't run very well, or maybe it even destroys it, and it's like they've got just the minimum amount of time to fix this car. And so the guy's like, I'm going to go over and beat his head in. And then, the grandfather comes in, or someone else comes in and says, why don't you just beat him in the race? And he's like, well, I can't, and then if the music starts, the montage goes, and they rebuild the car overnight. And sure enough, it doesn't look as good as it used to, but they win and they stick it to the other person. That happens. But in my life, I had a point probably between the age of 25 and say 40 when I saw someone being a wimp. I would motivate them very nicely, I wasn't really putting a tremendous amount of bowl of cherries on it, but I wouldn't be coarse with them or anything. But the more they kept replicating insanity, doing the same stupid thing that never turns out to benefit them, I would lean into them lovingly. But I would lean into them and I would let them know exactly how stupid I thought what they were doing was. And I'd say, and it would be very constructive at the same time by saying, look, you're too good for this bullshit that you're doing. You're too nice to act mean. You're too smart to act dumb. You've done so many amazing things in your life. You're surrounded by a great family that has done a bunch of amazing things. But even if you didn't have that, you can look around the world at people that have the goals that you want. Why can't you just usurp them? Take what's good and leave everything else behind. And they're usually very shocked emotionally. They're like, whoa, man, tell me what you really think, right? And, and they know I'm loving them at the same exact time, but, I can get extreme, let me tell you, because I don't believe in lying to anybody for any reason whatsoever. It just doesn't help, And when you tell someone that something, it's all going to be okay, you're not lying to them. You just don't know exactly when that's going to occur, right? But after a while of doing this, and especially dating the same person for a really long time, they eventually lean over and they go, look, could you be a little nicer during these situations, And so I've been modifying, ever so slight, because I know my other system does work. I'm just not the most popular guy at the end of the cycle. And I had a buddy of mine who's a fairly well-known comedian, coast to coast. And I'm just going to give you a situation where it worked. And I didn't have to get at all cantankerous with this guy at all. But he and I've told the story once before, but he said, his father had passed away. And he's got the biggest heart on planet Earth. He's got a great wife, great life. And he was at his father's deathbed, I think in a December time frame. And he and I have been trying to get together for like a year now. We keep planning it, and then we just both get busy. He has to fly around the world to do his thing. But anyway, his father told him on his deathbed, he goes, get back on stage. Because he had started using, there's other methods he knows how to make money with that is very reliable, and, comedy is a fairly reliable way for him to make money as well, but it's very tough on the system. He has to leave home a lot, and he's on the road a lot, so it just, it beats you down. And once you hit, 45, that can get a little tougher. So I didn't know this, that his father had said this, and he and I had started hanging out in March. I actually drove up to see him, and in fact, no, he and I were on the telephone first. And I think he had actually come down to see me, and then I went up to see him, and then I went back home, and what I had told him was, I said, look, what are you doing with your life right now? Oh, I'm doing this other thing. I said, really? I said, that doesn't sound like the best use of this brilliant mind that I'm looking at. I said, I've seen you own crowds on levels that's unbelievable. One of the first gigs I ever got him booked at, he got picked to be on a pilot. And I managed to book a gig for everyone on the pilot. It was a comedy show. And we were, building a pilot for television. So all the comedians were, one of the gigs was at a restaurant. We did lots of restaurants with this gig because it was kind of a live performance thing. But anyway, all the comedians were told to keep it clean because this is TV. All the comedians are really intense and creative when they're in Los Angeles, like I've told you guys a couple times. But he is sitting there watching these guys come up, and people were starting to drop the really acidic, I don't know, it's super funny shit, but really some of the darker, bluer humor, right? And everyone's dying, everyone's loving these comedians going up and doing their thing. But my buddy, he's looking around going, he's talking to me, he's like, I thought this is supposed to be clean. I said, yeah, we told everyone to keep it clean. So we reissued the, directive, guys, you're going to have to clean this up, otherwise none of this will be usable. And so they did kind of peter out, but one guy just before him, because they were going in rounds to make people laugh, he tells this blue joke, and so my buddy's looking at me like, all right, I can do this game. He walks up to the stage, walks up to the mic, drops one of the funniest jokes ever. I can't even repeat on the show, but everybody died. He dropped the mic. He won this little contest we were having. And he's like, I can go dark. I mean, I can go blue or whatever it is, not dark, just blue. It was a funny ass joke. But anyway, so I'm talking to him and I said, we need to get you back on stage, man. I'm sorry I haven't been able to help you in this last couple of years. And so we booked him at a little place up in Hollywood. It's a very very famous place owned by another very famous comedian. But it's really an open mic kind of thing. And he's way above that, right? But here he is a professional. He's a professional actor. He's a professional comedian. And he's like, I'm going to go to it's John Lovett's place. I think he still owns it. It's on the Hollywood boardwalk thing up there in Universal Studios. And so we show up, and I bring my girlfriend. He brings his wife, and we had a really good time. And, of course, all these kind of, up-and-coming rookie comedians are doing a pretty damn good job, and they're going up there. So he ends up going up and taking a bullet, really. Like image-wise, for him to show up at that venue would be like me, I don't know, being a CEO of a video game company, and then I'm serving you Wendy's next, right? So for him, it was sort of a downgrade. But he gets up there, and he kills it. It's like a 5-minute set. Absolutely kills it. And he can do like 2 hours if he needs to. And so after that, he's like, this felt good, man. He goes, I'm going to come back here once a week. I said, you sure? And he's like, yeah. So fast forward a couple of years, he's back on the road. He's killing it. He's doing casinos. He's doing all kinds of wild venues, man, in Vegas and other places in Hollywood here, Indian Reservation, casinos and stuff. And I'm just giving you this example because this is how you can change your life. This is sometimes what you need to do. Sometimes it's what you need to hear from other people. But he had a VH1 special. He's done a couple now. And so we all come to attend the special, to be the crowd. It's a very tiny venue. And so he, just before he starts this set, he goes, I want to give a shout out, a thanks. Because if that wasn't for this person, I wouldn't be on stage right now. And I'm like, ooh, what? I wonder who this is, right? And he points right at me. And he goes, that dude right there. He goes, if it weren't for him, I would have been doing this other thing instead of doing my God-given talent. And he goes, what he doesn't know is that my father told me on my deathbed to get back on stage. And I didn't do it because a lot of my comedy has to do with my mother and my father. And I wasn't capable of going on stage and emotionally talking about my father. And he keeps the jokes as if his father's alive, by the way. I think it's great. I don't know if he still does that today, but he threw me this shout out, and it's like nothing in my entire life I've ever experienced, So you can be that for somebody else, and you can get that from someone else. To get that motivation, to get out there and do it. If you're going to do it to someone else, your EQ is going to be a really big thing, to be empathetic. But how empathetic was it for him to throw the shout out, And later after the set was over and we got done filming, he's tugging me along in the party, and he's like, this is the guy. It was sort of embarrassing, but it was flattering at the same time. And so to see him now, I think it's been, it must have been 6 or 7 years ago when this occurred. He is killing it now. He hasn't left the stage since. He wasn't going to lose it. Like I've told you guys several times in episodes, when you're on top, do what you need to do to preserve being on top. Don't hurt anybody else. Don't steal. Don't step on a head. But do what you got to do to stay on top. Because it's hard to get on top. So I did an episode on formal education. Obviously, it doesn't get a lot of votes or a lot of, views, because it's just like, what are you going to talk about? If you go and look at the comments in there, you're going to hear a bunch of brilliant people talking about their experience of like, yeah, I didn't get the formal education, but this is what I've done. Boom, 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 boom. It's huge, right? It's huge what some of these people have done. Okay. What I think is probably the truth for all the people that have had success outside of formal education is their EQ is extremely high. Especially people that build their own businesses and their employees love them. Huge EQ. They have it. The self-awareness, self-management, the motivation, the empathy, and the social skills. It all comes together to give you a score as to how well you're doing. Now, I'm going to give you another perspective, and this is just simply me. I don't say this? It's my assumption through my empathetic abilities of what is occurring. We have, obviously, an explosion of homelessness in the United States of America. Southern California is starting to gain quite a few. And this is way before any sanctuary city ever arrives, where, sanctuary cities in Los Angeles used to be for the homeless, and now it's for all the illegals. It's interesting. We have Skid Row down in LA, and it's one of the most, it's bizarre. You go down there, and it's been that way for years, and you'll walk down a street, and there are tons of homeless people in tents. They've been this is where they live. They've lived there for a very long time. Some of these people live down there for 20 years. They've never had a job. And I always try to look at them and feel what they're feeling and try to gain a perspective. And there was, unfortunately, a crime that occurred somewhere. I think it was the Bay Area, which is San Francisco, for those of you who don't know. There was a poor woman that was murdered by a homeless guy. And he was a little insane for whatever reason. And I heard his court case. They filmed it, and I got to see it. Somehow, I don't know where the hell I was in the world, but I saw it. And he had this big, long word, which I don't remember at the time, but he said, "This is the reason why I did what I did." And I think he was, here's the thing. He could have been wrong and he could have been right about what happened to him. But we all run the risk of doing what he said. It doesn't justify anything that he did, trust me. But it is something that we can do, and as an empathetic person, to gain better social skills, especially in those extreme circumstances where you're maybe in a Skid Row situation. I've got another story about the Skid Row in LA, but first and foremost, in the storyline here, he used this word, and the word meant that someone was scoffing at him, and the word meant something like, it's like the person in the Bible who goes up and prays to God at the Bible, in the temple, and he's praying out loud, and he says, "Thank you, Lord, for giving me all of the benefits you've given me, all the monies, all the riches, all the intelligence, all the opportunity, whatever." But this last thing he said was, "Thank you for making me not like these people in this room." He's saying this out loud. It's a fake situation, but I'm sure someone's done it in life, right? That's generally what the word meant. He thought this woman walked by him and scoffed at him, at her superiority and his lack of superiority. He was obviously in a great deal of pain emotionally, and I'm sure this festered in his mind. Once he learned the word, the definition, just like a magnet, he was seeing it everywhere, whether it was real or whether it was fake. And instead of verbally maybe yelling at her or something and calling her out and giving her a chance to represent herself, he went over and killed her somehow. Horrible situation. And so when I first saw that, it moved me, because I was like, Jesus, am I doing that without even thinking about it? Am I putting off a vibe? I don't think I do. I keep very, very monotone in those situations. I don't try to show any emotion whatsoever when I'm in the presence of people suffering, unless I know them or unless I'm helping them and I show them my sympathy and empathy towards them of like, okay, we're going to get you worked out here. Don't worry about it. And I can talk and I can let them know my intent, right? But I've rarely been in that situation at that level, right? I haven't come up on a car accident where I can help anybody. It's never happened to me. But fast forward probably, 20 years from when I saw that, somewhere in that range. I had a girlfriend. We're in LA. We're with another couple, another amazing couple. And we had just seen a really bad musical. It was so bad. But one of our friends was in the band or whatever. And so we went down to see it. And now it's down in downtown LA, right by the Skid Row. So you had to walk through Skid Row to get to the venue, or at least this place we ended up getting drinks or something like that. But then we're walking back, and it's pretty much daytime the whole time. And in fact, this is probably just prior to seeing the actual musical. And so we're walking, and the four of us look really good. I mean, we're dressed up and everyone looks really pretty and we came in nice cars and all this good stuff. And my girlfriend at the time was saying something sort of like she was just literally being innocent and just kind of going, wow, this is wild, man. This is like, she lives in Hollywood. She's not, new to LA or anything. And she was just like, man, I haven't seen it like this up close this much. But she's talking about it in complete earshot of everybody down there. And I know that I don't have enough time and I can't form words fast enough to explain to her, you don't want to be saying these things right now. You have no idea whether one of those guys who's feeling scoffed at is listening and he's literally on the edge of his world to, hurt somebody because he's just so pissed. And so I kind of was like, and I don't want them to hear me reply to her. So I don't want to have them hear me say, we don't say these, the best thing I've learned is not to say any of this kind of stuff while they can hear you. I can't say that. I don't even remember what I said, but I got her to kind of be quiet. And she's not terribly into these kind of deeper concepts. I mean, she's a great person, but, she didn't really, she's an innocent person, She was two years older than me, so she was no puppy, But later on, I said, okay, here's the thing. This is like where you got to be careful. And she was just looking at me like, really? You really think that was going to happen? And I'm like, yeah, I think it can happen, man. It's happened in lesser places than Skid Row in LA, That's sort of a digression in the mental exercise of becoming empathetic in extreme examples such that you can bring it back to your own personal life in lesser examples. Again, Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, God bless the guy. He was Christ on earth. I mean, he was the most empathetic person towards children that I am aware of in this world, in world history. Perhaps we can assume that many people like him existed in this world, but they didn't get television shows. They didn't work for 36 years helping us love each other. But now, Fred's been gone since 2003. God bless that man. I'm going to assume his EQ level is as high as that little meter goes. And I think that that's a great goal for us to set so that we may enjoy our own lives better and better and better. As a takeaway from this episode, what I want you to realize is that even if the world was a perfect place, which it's not, EQ is something we need to manifest. It is literally a school of life. You will probably never have a class in school unless we take over the world and redo everything that's going to teach you EQ. You can read about it all you want, but in the end, even if you have the definition at the tip of your tongue, you can recite Wikipedia's definition or the books that have been written on the subject, EI and EQ. You will have to do it yourself. And so this is going to be one of those games you can play every single day to have some fun, hopefully. Please understand that there are movements and technologies and forms of entertainment that are designed to deprive you of your EQ growth. And as much as you might have it, depends on how old you are as to whether or not you plan on being a senator, a president, a major corporation participant, a banker, and you're going to use this skill of yours to rebuild the world in a better place, in a better status, right? If you have children or grandchildren or you're around kids, for any reason, you're a teacher, you don't have any of your own kids, maybe you never want them, doesn't matter. This is something that they are going to have to be made aware of. Now, what's happening is, if you read even the most basic definitions of this stuff online and look at the criticisms of the EQ EI movement, is that they are trying to demonize this registry because they don't want us to, they're trying to shame it, is what they're trying to do. They don't want us to be self-aware. So, of course, academia, which is probably largely made out of super low EQ people, are coming in to shit on it because then they're still okay. Don't notice that I have no empathy. Don't notice that I'm not aware. Don't notice that I can't manage my life or motivate myself. That I have no social skills. So I'm going to demonize this technology that's out there that helps you become enlightened in this area. I'm going to give you guys a silly little analogy for those who want to listen to the bonus track at the end of this episode, because this is a archetype of what I think is going on in education in this world, and why I think that this show has a special place in people's hearts. I recently have been learning a bunch of new internet platforms. Very easy to learn. Very, straightforward stuff, using all the traditional languages that we knew, with a couple new ones, but they're built off other languages, so whatever. But now here's what I have discovered. In trying to learn some of these new platforms, I have noticed that you'll go and view tutorials, great tutorials. You can read them online, you can watch videos, Vimeo, YouTube, whatever. And what they end up doing is they keep showing you these tutorials as if everything is going to go right. So you're typing in everything they're typing in, and they're expecting everything to go right. Now, after you have everything set up on your computer, those tutorials work really well, on average. But almost all these platforms are an absolute nightmare to set up. You will do what they say, and then immediately where they go, well, see, when you reload the browser, boom, you see this page, and that means everything's set up okay, and you'll reload it, and it'll have a 500 error, 502 error, 419 error, all these errors that are going on. You're like, what the hell? And so you go out on, stackoverflow.com, and you'll start looking up all these answers or these questions like, look, I'm having this error. And there will be thousands of threads where people have run into this problem. And no one offers a solution. And you'll find a couple threads where people are offering what worked for them. And you try those steps and it doesn't work. And that's because these are poorly engineered platforms, or I should say perhaps they were never meant to work together. And people are trying to push them together. But none of the tutorials, here's the thing. I've got a guy on Vimeo who is teaching me one thing, and he's amazing. I mean, this guy talks about the errors, and he shows you the errors, and he goes, if you have this, this is what this is. If you have that one, this, and he solves it perfectly. It's beautiful, right? They don't talk to you about life as if anything they're telling you will go wrong. Just do this and it all works. Really? Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. So one of the reasons why I super digress from time to time into my own personal life experiences is so that you can see how good intentions can go awry. But if you stick to it, you can get those good intentions to go right. But you just have to convince yourself and anyone else that's involved in what you're trying to do to stick to it. I spent, at my level of programming, this is astonishing to me, okay? I spent, 7 days trying to get a particular platform set up on my local computer such that I could program on my Mac, then move the files over to my Windows machine. And if I take my Windows machine out and do some programming at the lounge or some other person's house, I can then migrate those back to my Mac. Sounds pretty simple. There's a million technologies to make that happen. I have made millions and millions of dollars worth of video games in these environments, in my companies where I set them up personally, set all my engineers up. We never had a hiccup. With technology, it's 15 years old now. Now the copycat technologies were like, well, you don't want to use that. That's bad. Use this new technology. It's good. The new good technology's got all these problems with it, where the old technology was perfect. It's interesting. So please know that there's a method to my madness when I'm going through all these different examples. Hopefully it's entertaining as a story. And hopefully some of you have run into some of these issues where you are being told something and it just doesn't work. But the other one I'll give you an analogy for, and all of you guys will know this one, and some of you ladies will too. How many times have you seen a self-defense course? And I've used this in a few episodes. I don't know if I've actually aired yet. You have a self-defense course, and again, I've gone to them. I've watched them online. I've had personal ones with personal people, and they will give you the most ridiculous attacks that people never do in the real world. And they give you the most ridiculous attacks back. So they'll say that the way you're being attacked, if someone, I saw one the other day where it was filmed in India, and it was this woman in one of those beautiful Indian dresses, and it was a guy grabbing her right wrist, and she did this move to get his hand off of her wrist, and I was like, that's never going to happen, right? And there's videos now that are compilations of sort of fake martial arts, right? These guys that have all these chi weapons, and it's just all bullshit, right? But self-defense, I would say, not necessarily any particular martial art, but self-defense is an interesting thing. These people are running rackets selling you false attacks, and then you're supposed to attack back in a way that is so ludicrous that you would have to be Bruce Lee or some head MMA fighter, and you'd have to be 6'5" to make some of these things work. You'd have to be able to rip a telephone book in half to make some of these things work. And so you're getting fed a bunch of crap that then eventually gives you false sense of security. So you get yourself in a bad situation and you get clocked. You get raped, you get murdered, you get kidnapped, whatever. The amount of girlfriends I've taken through self-defense courses is almost unanimous, saying, look, you need to know some basic things, okay? I know this seems like a 1 in a billion thing that's never going to happen, but let me tell you, if it happens, you're going to be so glad I taught you like 4 or 5 things to save your life, even in the most extreme circumstances. Some people don't know how weapons work, and so they think if a gun's pointed at them, they're completely, at odds. Of course, you have assholes now that just run in and shoot everybody and then take $10 out of a register. I mean, unbelievable scumbags in this planet. Anyway, I think you feel me. This is something that is circling in my personal life for a particular project, and I thought I would extend it out to you guys. For those of you who haven't gone to deepthoughtsradio.com, the main value is essentially all the links to get the shows, to go backwards in time and see old shows. I think YouTube, quite frankly, is the very best way to get most of the shows, to figure out what you need. The podcast will only give you, I think, 300 episodes back, so it's not going to give you the full podcast all the way back to the beginning of time unless you run your own podcast feed and you go off the website. But if you're coming in on video, you can go to audio. If you're coming in audio, you can go to video. If you like social intercourse with other people like you, go to Facebook and click the Facebook link and go in and apply. Again, I ask you one question. Say something human. Tonight I had 2. One guy said something, and one housewife from India who said nothing and joined 4 days ago and somehow pops onto Deep Thoughts. So block her forever. She'll never get into the site. Sorry, she's fake. The other feed is Twitter. For those of you guys who are big Twitter fans, I guess the best thing about Twitter is that there's a lot of retweeting that people do. So someone might have a really hot Twitter page, refer one of the videos, and we might have ourselves a little subscription extravaganza. Wouldn't that be nice? There's 2 ways to donate to the show. There's patreon.com in case you want to put a tiny little monthly ding in your credit card or your bank account. And there's PayPal in case you just want to throw a sum of money at the show. It's used to pay for cigars. It's used to pay for cameras and software and all kinds of stuff I use to do this show. And again, I would love to do this full time and probably upgrade the show quite a bit, but that's not there. As I watch these channels get savagely turned off by YouTube, we have to keep in mind that there is a chance that the show would be completely removed for some reason. Today's May 1st, so whenever the show goes out, that's when this was recorded. I am now able to upload to BitChute. So the previous upload barrier I was running into is gone. So now I'm putting the new remastered Season 1 up there, and which means I got to haul butt and get the rest of those Season 1s updated. I think I'm on 45 right now. So I've got another 55 to remaster. But eventually those shows are going to be fully edited. So I'm actually still editing shows that don't have the previous regimen of how to edit them. So I'm also much quicker at this. And I'm increasing my home bandwidth to 300 up, 300 down. So uploading shows will go a hell of a lot faster than it's been in the recent past. There's a whole new channel for Season 1. Just going to give you a real quick bumper on that. They're remastered. They're remastered in a way that they can show in Europe. They're also remastered in terms of all the audio levels. Most shows are going down by at least 5 minutes and removing cigar drags and sitting there thinking moments, that sort of thing. So they're much easier to digest than they ever have been in the past. In the end, I will re-upload all of the podcast episodes for season 1. So if you do come back through podcasting, you're going to have a much better audio experience. I still haven't done that yet. So I'm just I'm in a race to get the whole YouTube thing done, and then we'll be set. We'll have it all. So if you are a BitChute fan, right now it's in season 1, so it's going to take quite a while to get all this up there. Again, on the 6th of May, I get my new internet connection, so that will hugely speed up the re-uploading of the episode. And when I'm dropping them on Patreon, for those of you who are Patreon fans, they will upload a lot quicker. So when I post that, hey, I'm uploading this episode right this very second, you're only going to have about 5 to 10 minutes to wait before it completely gets up there, probably around 5 minutes, to be honest. And then you have to wait 45 minutes for it to encode. Know that the videos are available in 360p initially. If you're coming into a brand new episode and it's low res, just hang in there. If you don't want to watch it in low res, just give it about 12 hours and they'll get their 4K version up there, which is 2160p. So anyway, that's all I got for you tonight. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.